Video, I'm going to talk about how we use Metaphor and how we use Humbug to actually build extensions to Humbug itself. So the software is largely built using AI. In fact, AI builds most of the code when we start doing anything. So I'm going to start by showing you a Metaphor file, which is the core Metaphor file for Humbug itself. And if you've seen the earlier introduction to Metaphor video, you'll see a couple of new things in here that you've not seen previously. So you'll see the initial thing we've got is a role. So this is what we're going to ask the AI to do. And so we're asking it to be a world-class Python programmer because Humbug is written in Python. The next thing we have is some context. You'll notice this section actually doesn't have very much in it right now in this file. And the reason for that is it's actually going to include two other Metaphor files, and they actually provide the bulk of the content. So that include keyword is actually pulling these other things in. And it means we can actually reuse the same elements of Metaphor description in multiple Metaphor files. And the final thing we've got is an action, which in this case is to build the software. In fact, we're actually telling it not to build it, but to think about building it. But to how do we actually make modifications and how do we actually really make a change, I wanted to give you a demonstration. So that's what the second Metaphor file is, and that's one called update. Now, this one has a lot more detail in terms of how we want the Python code to look. You can see some examples of Python fragments, some behavior, and some elements of what we'd like to see within the Python code. So I won't spend too much time on that. The important part here is when we get to the action. And what we actually want this Metaphor file to do, and what we want the AI to do in this case, is to build the very last feature that we're going to have in version 0.3 of Humbug. And that is we want a JSON parser and lexer. And we use those to support syntax highlighting. So there are a whole bunch of different syntax highlighters already available inside the software. And so what we're going to do is we're going to give it some examples of other parsers and lexers that exist inside the software and say, here's an example of how to go about writing them. And then I'd like you to write JSON parser and lexer. So we know the AIs have a pretty good idea what JSON looks like, so they should be able to do a pretty good job of this. What we're also going to do is ask them to make some other changes to the software as well. So there are these 5 files at the bottom here that are being listed that are places where we want to make some other changes in the software to be able to use this new JSON lexer and parser that we build. So that embed keyword is basically going to cause the files that are listed to be bolted into the prompt. So we'll take this file right now and we're going to start a new Metaphor conversation inside of Humbug. So we take the update file, we open it, and what it's done is it's actually compiled that file into a big prompt. And so in fact, if we scroll through this very quickly, what you can see, apart from the fact it's a massive prompt, is you can see these other files, or some of the other files that were actually embedded in here. And then if we scroll all the way to the very top, there we go. We scroll all the way to the very top, you'll actually see the prompt we saw earlier, and you'll also see a little bit of preamble, which is actually telling the AI how to actually interpret the rest of this file. So we're going to submit this to the AI, but first, before we do that, I'm going to change this from a default, which is Gemini, to Claude Sonnet. I tend to use Claude Sonnet for a lot of the software development. It tends to be really good at doing this sort of one-shot work. So we'll now submit that, and we'll start to see what comes back. So you can see the AI responding, and it's coming back and saying, here are some things that we actually want to do in this design. And it's starting to give us back a lexer, and we'll see some other pieces coming along, I'm sure, in a second. Yes, there we go. We start to see the parser. And now we're seeing some of the patches for the software itself. So we're going to have a quick look at what it's written. And so the first thing you'll notice is this doesn't look like anything you'll likely have seen before unless you happen to have read the Humbug source code. The lexer design and the parser design is unusual. It was designed for something very specific on my blog site, in fact, and we use it on the M6R website. But it's designed to be a very fast lexer and parser. So there's something in there that seems a little like it's worth a question because I'm not expecting to see it. So we're going to ask a quick question of Claude as to why it's done something. And so this is an important example of something that we actually do. So I've just read the code. I noticed there was something a little unusual. JSON doesn't support multi-line strings. Most of the languages, almost all of the lexers we have, actually do have multi-line strings, but JSON doesn't have them. So when I spotted that there was something in there that seemed to be supporting multi-line strings, it wouldn't have actually stopped it from working, but it was a bit unnecessary. I could just go and ask this question and go, well, why is that there? And you'll see it's actually rewritten that software. And if we actually scroll back to the bit that I noticed was a little odd, this is an element inside of the string processing. I can see that it's now actually gone away. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the files that we've just got, and I'll take the edits that have just been suggested, and we'll give them a try. Okay, so we've just restarted our application with the new software in place, and we obviously want to test something, so we have a file here called test.json, which is an example of something that is in JSON format, so we can see what's happened. And as you can see, it's now syntax highlighting the JSON. We may not like the colors, we can always change some of those, but you can see that it's highlighting strings and keywords, and we have our operators all now being highlighted as we would expect. There's one last test we need to make. So one of the things that we do have is we have the ability to, within Humbug, it has the ability to deal with embedded languages inside of another language. So if you look at that previous example of where we were doing stuff with Metaphor, Metaphor actually has the ability to embed other language fragments. So you saw it first off with the Python one. So we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to pick up the implementation file because that should have some JSON in it. And now, as you can see, we have the JSON inside of the Metaphor description is now being syntax highlighted as well. Thank you for watching. If you're interested, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, and you can follow us more on our journey at m6r.ai. You can also check out the software. You'll be able to see this software on our GitHub.